It began as a whisper, an image buried deep in the raw data of the James Webb Space Telescope. Something small, almost invisible. A flicker that should have been noise, but wasn't. When a handful of astronomers first noticed it, they thought it was a data glitch, a harmless artifact, the spectrographic readings, but the more they looked, the stranger it became. The pattern was too clean, too rhythmic, too deliberate. This wasn't dust scattering light, it wasn't a dying star, and it definitely wasn't a comet. Whatever it was, it behaved like nothing anyone had seen before. The object was already known to astronomers. It had a name, 3I/ATLAS, the third confirmed interstellar visitor ever recorded, an object that had entered our solar system from deep space. But what the Webb telescope captured changed everything we thought we knew, because the new data suggested something far beyond chance. If the readings were correct, 3I/ATLAS wasn't just a mysterious traveler. It might be watching us. When 3I/ATLAS was first spotted, most astronomers thought it would behave like its predecessors Oumuamua and Borisov, icy fragments from other star systems slingshotting past the sun before vanishing into the dark. But this object was different from the start. Its motion, its chemistry, even its silence, all defy explanation. Normally, when comets approach the sun, they release vapor and dust, forming bright tails that stretch across millions of kilometers. 3I/ATLAS didn't. It stayed cold, still. And instead of releasing water or carbon monoxide, it emitted only carbon dioxide, and in massive quantities. No water, no ice, no dust. Just CO2, a gas that shouldn't exist in isolation like that, not in those volumes. NASA's Sphere-X observatory was aimed at it to confirm the findings. Scientists expected to see S of the usual cometary gases, the fingerprints of a natural object. But the result was shocking. Nothing but CO2. No trace of the chemicals that define all known comet. A chemical profile never recorded before in space. And when researchers asked the most basic question, what kind of object emits carbon dioxide exclusively, the answer came back chillingly simple. None that we know of. If it wasn't acting like a comet, and it wasn't behaving like an asteroid, then what was it? Behind closed doors, NASA turned to the one telescope capable of seeing further and deeper than any instrument in history, the James Webb Space Telescope. Its task was quiet, classified, and simple. Observe 3I/ATLA. There was no public press release, no photographs shared online, no data for the astronomy community to analyze. For weeks, Webb tracked the object in silence. And then, according to a leaked report from within NASA, the data began to reveal something no one could explain. The images showed that 3I/ATLAS had no natural coma, no cloud of gas, no visible tail. But around it, stretching hundreds of thousands of kilometers into the void, was a perfectly symmetrical halo of carbon dioxide. No known natural process could create that kind of symmetry. The readings became even more unsettling when Webb's infrared sensors detected light coming from inside the object itself, not reflection, emissio light from within. That meant 3I/ATLAS wasn't just reflecting sunlight, it was producing light, and not randomly either. The frequencies were repeating, structured like a signal. When NASA's analysts broke down the data, they found a pattern inside the wavelengths, organized intervals that resembled engineered photonic systems, the kind of precise light modulation used in telecommunications or data transmission. These weren't natural emissions. They were rhythmic, repeating, and mathematical. It was as if the object was whispering in code, a cosmic Morse sequence pulsing across the stars. At this point, the mood inside NASA changed from curiosity to fear. Because this wasn't the first time something like this had happened in 1977, a powerful radio signal known as the WOW signal was detected from deep space. It lasted just 72 seconds, originating from the constellation Sagittarius. For decades, scientists called it an unsolved anomaly, the closest thing we've ever found to a message from the stars. Now, 3I/ATLAS was traced back to the same region of space. The odds of that happening by coincidence were almost impossible. As the parallels grew, the official silence became louder. Inside NASA, teams were divided. Some wanted to release the data, others demanded total secrecy, but the truth was already leaking. A handful of astronomers who had seen the web log said privately that what they found was unlike anything in natural astrophysics. An object 46 kilometers wide, far larger than Oumuamua or Borisov, emitting internal light surrounded by a symmetrical CO2 halo, moving in a trajectory that didn't make sense. Statistically, an interstellar object of that size should almost never appear. For one to arrive in our solar system aligned perfectly with the orbital plane of our planets, following a path that passes close to Earth before continuing deeper inward, the odds are nearly zero. It wasn't tumbling chaotically like debris, it was gliding, smooth, precise, deliberate, like something that knew where it was going. Avi Loeb, a Harvard astrophysicist known for his controversial theories about extraterrestrial technology, called the trajectory technologically suggestive. He pointed out that 3I/ATLAS's approach angle wasn't just convenient for observation, it was optimized for it, almost as if it wanted to be seen but not fully understood. That was when the theories began. Some suggested that the object could be an asteroid modified by an intelligent civilization, hollowed out rock repurposed as a vessel or a probe. Others speculated it was part of a far larger system, a self-contained habitat traveling through the void for millennia, wrapped in stone for protection. The idea might sound like science fiction, but in engineering circles, it's already been proposed. Scientists on Earth have theorized that interstellar travel could be achieved by hollowing asteroids and building habitats inside them, shielding travelers from radiation and micrometeorites using the rock's own mass. So what if someone, somewhere, had done exactly that, thousands of years ago? The leaked Webb report hinted at this very possibility, because if 3I/ATLAS was a natural rock, it should have behaved like one. Instead, it was acting like a machine pretending to be a rock. The spectral emissions weren't random, the symmetry wasn't coincidence, and the trajectory, perfectly aligned with planetary orbits, suggested navigation, not drift. Someone or something had built it. But what terrified scientists most wasn't its construction, it was its behavior. Because when Webb's instruments focused on the object longer than usual, the signals began to change. The rhythm shifted, the intervals grew longer, and then a pause. An extended silence in the light pattern, as if something had noticed it was being watched and stopped to listen back. Within days, NASA classified the Webb data and shut down external observation requests. Other observatories were instructed not to point their instruments toward the object. Publicly, 3I/ATLAS was dismissed as a carbon-rich interstellar comet. Privately, the message was clear: stop looking. But by then, the leak was out, and the scientists who had seen the data knew they were looking at something more than a comet, an object that wasn't just reflecting light, but sending an object that didn't stumble into our solar system, but entered it, a visitor that seemed to be not observing, but observing back. And in the quiet halls of NASA, where data analysts reviewed the final light curves from Webb, "Oh note" was written at the bottom of the report. A line that was later redacted from the public archive: emissions suggest deliberate signal structure. Possible artificial origin. Whatever 3I/ATLAS is, comet, probe, or something else entirely, it isn't behaving like nature. And that's why, for the first time since the discovery of Oumuamua, NASA isn't simply studying anomaly. They're panicking, because what they found out there may not just be another object passing through. It may be something that came looking for us. By the time the first whispers of a NASA data leak reached the public, it was already too late. The signal was out, and the people who'd seen it couldn't unsee it. Inside NASA, panic had turned into silence. The James Webb Space Telescope's observation of 3I/ATLAS was now classified. Files were locked, terminals wiped, and communication between departments sealed behind government encryption. Publicly, the agency maintained calm. Officials insisted the object was harmless. A cold, carbon-rich comet, nothing more. But behind closed doors, that calm was gone. Because what Webb had seen wasn't natural, the leaked internal report described something extraordinary and terrifying. Around 3I/ATLAS, Webb had detected not just a symmetrical CO2 halo, but subtle light pulses embedded within that halo, faint flashes structured like signal. Each burst carried its own precise frequency pattern, and those frequencies repeated in intervals too perfect for nature. At first, analysts thought it was interference, a software glitch. But as they filtered the raw infrared data through deep frequency modeling, the pattern sharpened. It wasn't noise, it was code, repeating sequences of prime numbers, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17, the universal mathematical finger pry of intelligence. Across decades, SETI scientists have theorized that any message from a non-human civilization would begin with prime sequences, a way to say, we are here. We know math, we know you do too. And now James Webb had recorded that exact pattern, but this wasn't a radio transmission. It wasn't electromagnetic chatter. It was light, structured light, the most advanced form of communication known to science, one that can travel unbroken across the cosmos, carrying vast amounts of information in the tiniest fluctuations of wavelength. And within that light, researchers noticed something even stranger, a gap. Between every group of prime pulses came a silent interval, perfectly consistent, perfectly timed, almost as if something was pausing, waiting, listening. That was when NASA issued the internal directive. No further public observation requests would be processed for 3I/ATLAS. All external telescope coordination canceled, and all Webb data linked to the observation restricted. But as always, silence breeds curiosity. Within days, a new set of files appeared anonymously on encrypted servers used by independent astrophysicists and SETI researchers. The folder was simply titled Echo Sequence. Inside were spectral readings that matched Webb's data exactly, detailed breakdowns of CO2 halos, light curves, and waveform modulations, each one identical to NASA's internal documentation, each one showing that 3I/ATLAS wasn't emitting light randomly. It was encoding it. The files spread across private research networks like WildF, and that's when the world's other space agencies, the European Space Agency, the Indian Space Research Organization, and the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, quietly turned their telescopes toward 3I/ATLAS. But within 48 hours, something unprecedented happened. Satellite redirection logs began spiking. Requests flooded through NASA and ESA channels, not from astronomers, but from Melita defense agencies. NORAD, the U.S. Space Command, and the newly formed U.S. Space Force all issued emergency tracking assignments for an object officially described as Tactical Unknown Origin, Level 1, the same classification used for potential threat. And then, without announcement, the United States launched a secret payload into low Earth orbit, the X-37B, a classified unmanned spaceplane used for defense operation. Its orbital path was reconstructed by independent trackers, and it wasn't random. It lined up almost perfectly with 3I/ATLAS's incoming trajectory. The question was no longer scientific, it was strategic. Was the object being observed or intercepted? Behind the scenes, internal memos began circulating across defense networks, referencing a new threat category, technological unknowns of extraterrestrial origin, codename TUEEOS. It was the first time in history an interstellar object had been officially treated not as a discovery, B, as a possible contact event. For scientists, that realization was shattering, because as they continued analyzing the leaked Webb data, a small group of astrobiologists began to see patterns no one wanted to believe. The light emissions from 3I/ATLAS weren't static. They were adaptive, shifting in wavelength and rhythm as if responding to something. At times, the signals mirrored bursts from Earth's radio telescopes. At others, they shifted frequency immediately after Webb focused on the object, almost like an interaction, as though the object knew it was being observed. The idea was unthinkable, but the evidence was mounting. The pauses between light pulses lengthened when Webb tracked it directly. They shortened when observation ceased. This wasn't passive reflection, it was feedback. And that's when a new theory began circulating within NASA's own analysis teams. A theory so controversial, it was immediately buried. What if 3I/ATLAS wasn't built? What if it was grown? Astrobiologists had long speculated about biomechanical synthesis, hybrid entities that blend biological and artificial components to survive in deep space organisms that use metallic structures for skeletons, radiation-absorbing membranes for skin, and neural networks made of both organic and synthetic material. Intelligence not evolved through biology alone, but through engineering and adaptation. Could 3I/ATLAS be one of them? If so, then it wasn't a spacecraft in the traditional sense. It was a living system, part machine, part mind, capable of decision-making on interstellar timescales. And if it could think, then it could choose where to go. That possibility changed everything. Because if this thing was alive, even in some mechanical sense, it meant it wasn't just traveling, it was exploring. Perhaps it had been drifting for eons, scanning for electromagnetic signatures, searching for the spark of technology, the kind that marks the presence of intelligent life. And now, after thousands of years in the dark, it had found us. Still, most scientists refused to believe it. They wanted data, not fear. But fear was exactly what came next. As the object drew closer to the inner solar system, something began happening across the Deep Space Network, the vast array of antennas NASA uses to communicate with distant probes. First, small signal distortions, then complete dropouts. Entire telemetry streams from spacecraft like New Horizons and Voyager 2 went silent, all at the same time. At first, engineers blamed solar interference, but the sun was quiet. No flares, no storm. Then came the real shock. The dropouts matched the exact times when Webb had its instruments pointed at 3I/ATLAS. It was as if something out there was reacting to our gaze, interfering with our instruments the moment we tried to study it. Coincidence? Impossible. Some called it electromagnetic suppression, a defensive mechanism, a cloaking effect, or a warning. Others thought it was something far stranger, communication through denial. A message not in what we received, but in what we suddenly couldn't. The scientists who noticed the pattern went silent soon after. Emails deleted, projects reassigned. The public was told the outages were routine system errors. But for those who'd seen the timing themselves, it was clear. 3I/ATLAS wasn't just emitting a signal. It was responding to ours. The James Webb Telescope had looked deep into the unknown, and the unknown had looked back. In those moments, every assumption humanity had about our isolation in the universe began to collapse. Because whatever was out there, it wasn't just a rock or a relic drifting through space. It was aware, it was active, and it was listening. NASA's official line remained unchanged: a harmless interstellar body. But inside every control room, on every encrypted terminal, one phrase kept reappearing in quiet conversations among analysts and engineers: we made contact. We just don't understand how. And yet, there was one final detail, something only a few had seen. The pulses from 3I/ATLAS were changing shape, as if entering phases. Phase 1 had been detection. Phase 2, adaptation. And whatever came next was beginning now. Something intelligent was signaling across the void, and NASA wasn't just studying it anymore. They were preparing for whatever came next. By the time 3I/ATLAS crossed into the inner solar system, everything had changed. What began as a scientific anomaly had become something far more serious, something that had the attention of every intelligence agency on Earth. For the public, NASA said little. They spoke in cautious, measured tones about further analysis, atmospheric composition, and signal misinterpretations. But inside secure rooms, with no cameras and no recordings allowed, the truth was being whispered. 3I/ATLAS wasn't behaving like a comet or an asteroid or even a machine. It was moving like something alive. Tracking data leaked from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory showed that the object's course had shifted. Not by accident, not from gravitational interaction, but deliberately. 3 sudden angular deviations, each one exact, calculated, and beyond the ability of natural forces. The trajectory wasn't random anymore. It was steering. Simulations showed that after passing near Jupiter's orbit, 3I/ATLAS altered its heading toward the asteroid belt, a maneuver that would require propulsion or control, and within 9 months, it would enter a position perfectly aligned between Mars and Earth. The precision was uncanny, a gravitational corridor where communications, visibility, and planetary proximity all peak simultaneously. If this were a natural body, such an alignment would be a 1 in a billion event. To many inside NASA, that statistic said everything. The countdown had begun. The first clue came not from telescopes, but from the data itself. Within the repeating light pulses from the object, scientists began detecting small variations in wavelength, subtle shifts that, when converted into binary, revealed structured code. At first, it looked like noise, but when researchers ran the sequences through genomic algorithms, the kind used for decoding DNA, something impossible appeared. Hidden within the light frequencies were patterns that mirrored human DNA encoding. Not identical, but close enough to suggest a shared mathematical foundation, a universal logic of life. Helix turns, repetition sequences, paired markers. The discovery was so shocking that the team involved never got the chance to publish. Hours after their findings were uploaded to an internal network, federal directives ordered all research froze under national security containment. Publicly, they were told the data had been corrupted. Privately, the servers were wiped. Still, fragments survived. Enough to show one thing: the signal wasn't random, it was biological. And that's when the message changed. For weeks, the pulses from 3I/ATLAS had been consistent, evenly spaced, repeating in prime intervals. Then suddenly, a new pattern appeared. Long pulses, short bursts, and then silence. When decoded, the structure matched a countdown sequence. At the end of the pattern, 283 Earth days. The signal had never been human. But now, for the first time, it was counting time the same way did. What that number meant, no one could say. Some believed it marked a realignment, a final maneuver. Others thought it was a signal dispatch, even a self-activation. But whatever it was, the timing wasn't random. When analysts compared the new countdown to past events, to the appearances of Oumuamua in 2017 and Borisov in 2019, a disturbing pattern emerged. Every 7 years, a new interstellar object appeared, each one larger, faster, and more structured than the last, each one carrying signals more complex than the previous. If that pattern held, then 3I/ATLAS wasn't the first. It was the third phase of an ongoing sequence, and the countdown wasn't marking something happening out there. It was marking something coming here. Within weeks, the signals began to evolve again. The light pulses from the object began modulating in frequency bands that matched the hydrogen line, the same frequency used in the Voyager Golden Record as the universal constant of intelligent life. To the trained eye, it was unmistakable. This was communication. Then came something no one could explain. NASA's Deep Space Network began detecting faint reflections of its own transmissions, not from T-probe signals they sent, but from somewhere else. Somewhere in the direction of 3I/ATLAS. It was as though the object was listening, capturing and echoing our signals back, not perfectly, but altered, as if rewriting them. And then, silence again. When the network's engineers examined the static between pulses, they found faint harmonic distortions, waveforms identical to those recorded decades ago by Voyager 1 as it crossed the heliopause. At the time, the reading was dismissed as noise, but now, over 20 years later, it matched 3I/ATLAS's emissions exactly. The conclusion was chilling. This wasn't the first time we'd heard, and we just never recognized it before. As the countdown ticked on, the object continued to change. Its surface reflectivity shifted, like it was reconfiguring its infrared images, showed new patterns of heat across its structure, geometric lines that formed, disappeared, then formed again. To some, it looked like energy channels, pathways of power moving under its surface. And then came the shadow. In one of the last observations captured before NASA locked down all live feeds, Webb's infrared spectrogram revealed a linear distortion trailing behind the object, a shadow that behaved like nothing ever seen before. It didn't change with the sun's position. It didn't obey light. It was fixed, perfectly straight, perfectly dark, and immune to angle or perspective. Scientists called it self-shading. as if the object itself was bending the fabric of space around it, controlling the darkness that followed it. Days later, Webb lost visual contact entirely. 3I/ATLAS had passed behind the sun. The observation was over, but the signals didn't stop. Hidden within the noise floor of radio data, a faint pulse continued to echo. Every 12 hours, a 3 minutes. Consistent, steady, precise, almost synchronized with the rotation of Earth's own magnetic field. That detail sent shockwaves through the deep space network, because if the signal was matching Earth's rhythm, then it wasn't just transmitting, it was locking on. The closer scientists looked, the more it felt like an answer to a question humanity didn't know it had asked. And yet, in every official statement, NASA downplayed it. Nothing unusual detected. Normal cometary behavior. But deep within internal communications, among the engineers and physicists who'd seen the truth firsthand, one sentiment repeated again and again. They're not panicking because they don't understand it. They're panicking because they finally do: the light, the pulses, the biological code, the countdown. All of it pointed to one terrifying conclusion. 3I/ATLAS isn't a rock. It isn't a probe. It isn't a message from deep space. It's a presence. Something vast, intelligent, and deliberate, crossing interstellar distances with precision, emitting signals not for discovery, but for synchronization. And now, those signals are converging. The countdown continues. The trajectory holds. The emissions grow stronger. And somewhere between Mars and Earth, an object the size of a small city is still moving, silent, patient, and aware. NASA no longer releases updates. The James Webb team remains silent, and the world, unaware of what's coming, keeps looking at the stars. But the people who have seen the data, the few who know the truth, have stopped looking up, because they understand something most of us don't. When the countdown ends, we won't be watching the universe anymore. The universe will be watching us.